Probably the worst thing that I experienced about the 70s and Speedway was one of the stupidest rules I ever saw in my life. And that was wearing white pants. White pants in the pits. Say that 1,000 times. White pants in the pits, white pants in the pits. And it was awful. Staying alive, staying alive. Staying alive with white pants. And I kept saying to everyone, why do you wear these white pants when you're getting dirty in the pits with mud and oil? Who the hell made this rule? And they said, George Wynn made it in the SRA. So you had to wear these ugly white pants in the pits at all times. That was the rule. One of the things that I question as a 16-year-old motorcycle racer is like, why do we have to pay at the signups? You know, it costs money. I forget, it wasn't that much. It was like $5 or $10, but still, it was $5 or $10. And I went to the promoters and I went to Frida and George Wynn, and I said, why do we have to pay for signups? They have 8,000 people coming to the Speedway. The promoters are getting rich, and the riders, the top riders, are getting rich. And here us poor squat D3 riders, we have to pay to put on the show. I said, why? If you see like a Hollywood actor and he's in a movie, he doesn't have to pay to be in that movie. So I'm wondering, all this money being made, why do we, as poor, lowly, beginning riders and other riders who are experienced, why do we have to pay to be in the show?
I thought I saw a putty cat. I did saw a putty cat.
And getting on the program, especially at Costa Mesa back in the day, in the heyday, was difficult. They said, and it's true, that if you didn't transfer, that you'd have to wait 4 to 6 weeks as a lower division rider to get back on the program. 4 to 6 weeks, that's like a third of the Speedway season. It was ridiculous. That's how many Speedway riders wanted to race back in that day. That's how popular it was to be a racer, to race in front of like 8,000 screaming fans. So it was pretty exciting back in those days, but if you didn't win,
lose.
You had to be put in the back of the pile, and it took about 4 to 6 weeks to get back on the program, which really sucked. And I remember as a new rider, I didn't have any experience. I wanted to race, and the season was almost over. It was like in August. And I was like, the season will be over by the time I get on the program. So every day, every Friday after school, I would leave my school, El Medina, and I would have my van loaded up, and I would drive to Costa Mesa. And I would always be the first person in line in case somebody didn't show up. I would be a reserve rider. And what do you know? Every Friday night, there'd be 1 or 2 riders in my division that would not participate or show up. And I would take their place. I didn't know what I was doing. I just raced around the thing. It was like I was having fun.
Yeehaw, mother. Yeehaw.
You know, it was good just to be out there, to be, you know, just racing, although I wasn't very good. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have any gloves, or, you know, I had these old pair of leathers from Ron Taylor, and they didn't fit me. It didn't matter. I duct taped my name on the front of the uniform, but I was on a Speedway bike. I was racing at the Costa Mesa Speedway, and there were fans, probably a couple, 2 or 3, cheering for me as I buzzed around the track, totally out of control. But it was the experience. It was being there. You know, sometimes you don't have to be the best rider to have fun. And believe me, I had a good time. Being a young rider in the 70s was really cool because you could just like be up and close and personal with these top riders. They were really amazing. You could just look over and see all these great racers in the pits as you're sitting down. It's just amazing. And then you could see their behaviors, how they really worked hard for their money, how competitive these guys were. The riders in the 70s were tough, and they fight hard for their money. And there was a lot of money. And so with a lot of money becomes not a lot of friendship, let's say. And the riders were not there to help the other riders like myself. It was a dog eat dog, and it was a fight for survival. You know, today it's much different. There's not as much money in Speedway for the riders, and the riders are really cool. And it's just a different time, a different day, different age. But back in the day, it was a real fight. And, you know, people were fighting, and it was just really rough. I think the riders didn't like each other that much. Why? Because they were competing for so much money. And it was just a survival of the fittest in the early days of Speedway. It was really cool to be a rider back in the 70s because you were like a Hollywood celebrity. You'd be there and everyone knew your name. After the races, you'd be mobbed with autographs. I'd go to high school. Lots of pretty girls would come up to me and say, I saw you last night or last Friday night at the Speedway at Costa Mesa. And you were fantastic. And it was just such a charge. You know, I had been into sports all my life, baseball and football and other team sports. But in high school, I broke off and I went into Speedway. That was not a team sport. That was an individual sport. And it was all about me, myself, and I to succeed. And it was so exciting to have these people from your high school come up to you and say that they enjoyed watching you race. And it was such a charge. It made me feel so good that I got out of the team sports. I went into Speedway, which is an individual sport. The engines back in the day had a total loss system, which means the oil would run through the frame. It would drop out onto the track. So at the Speedway track, there's always lots of oil all over. They made you put these oil pans, but there was still a mess, lots of oil. But the sweet smell of the oil, the castor oil, the smell of that beautiful oil filled the air, especially when the bikes warmed up. And it was gorgeous. It was amazing. The times were just great. There wasn't always perfect times. That's the way life is. But life in the early days of Speedway was amazing. It was a lot of fun. It was challenging. It was grueling. And it was spectacular all in one. But thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Reminiscing the old days. The old days of Speedway. And let me tell you, they were good. And I appreciate you for hanging out with us today, reminiscing Speedway, SRA days, early days of Speedway as a young Speedway rider. It was cool. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like the show, and follow us here. We appreciate you. Thanks once again for hanging out with us today, reminiscing Speedway before. Thank you so much. And we're going to see you, of course, we're going to see you next time. Thank you.